He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. The Lord be with you. That was from Colossians 1, 15 and 16. And I was considering doing this on Sunday, but I'm thinking, maybe this isn't the best idea to do this on Sunday for Bible study, because there's something a little bit more important than that, and that's namely the gospel itself. Namely, all the good stuff about, the inheritance that we have, and the cleansing from sin, and being presented holy and blameless and above reproach, and all that good stuff. And so, anyway, this is a work in progress, but I was just thinking about this. And so if you'll track with me, and if you want to talk about it on Sunday, well, I'll be there, 9 a.m. sharp. All right, let's go. Authorities and agents of God, the thrones and dominions, the rulers and authorities versus the apostles and the church. So I did a presentation on this before. There's a YouTube video out there on how do we know the truth about the formal and material principles of the church, the source and center of our theology. So it kind of goes like this. This is very much in brief. God is the source of our theology, the source of our doctrine. He's the source of truth. If you want truth, you have to go to God. But God has spoken it many times in his various ways through the prophets. He's spoken to us through creation. He speaks to us through our conscience. But if you really want to know God, as the Apostle Paul says, I'm going to read Colossians 2, verse 10. For in Jesus, the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily. If you want to know God, you better get to know Jesus. And how do we know Jesus? Well, the only way that we know Jesus isn't because he was such a great teacher. The thing that distinguishes Jesus from all the other teachers and philosophers and self-help people and YouTube gurus and whatever great people who made religions, the thing that separates Jesus from all the rest is he died and he rose again. Unlike anyone else, he gave proofs and evidence of that. That's how we know that Jesus is the revelation from God. No other person in all of history can make that claim. No other philosopher, no other religion can make that claim to have that kind of demonstrable, authoritative proof that this person has authority from God, that they are an agent from God. Of course, then we run into a little problem because Jesus hightailed it out of this present earth in his human form and ascended into heaven bodily and sits at the right hand of God, from which he reigns until the last day. And instead, he said, hey, I've got a good idea. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to trust the witnesses of who I am and what I said and what I did. I'm going to trust this. You know what? I'm going to give this to human beings. And so he entrusts his message to these apostles whom Luke in Acts chapter 1 tells us these people were witnesses of Jesus from his baptism all the way up to his resurrection. So these are witnesses. We have the apostolic witness recorded in the New Testament, and whatever you call these people, apostles, ambassadors, agents, secret agents, if you will, proclaim to us the risen Jesus and interpret for us the significance and meaning of Jesus. Centered in his death and resurrection. And that's how we know that they are apostolic witnesses and not just people who are making stuff up, is they point to Jesus's death and resurrection. But how do we know, there were other writings out there. There were other people talking about Jesus. As one agnostic New Testament scholar says, there wasn't one version of Christianity out there in the first century and second century. There were Christianities. There were various versions and interpretations of who Jesus was and what he did. How do we know what the right one is? And the answer is the apostolic witness as interpreted by the church. And in this version, I have the church in circles because, it's, while we believe in one unseen universal church, the Holy Christian Church, or as we should translate it, the Holy Universal Church, used to be Catholic, but that word got stolen. So the Universal Church, but the way we know the Universal Church is through the local gatherings. And so the church of all times and all places give witness to the apostolic witness, which gives witness to Jesus Christ and him crucified and risen from the dead. Okay. Are you with me? But how do you know? How do you know that the church is actually, doing what it's supposed to be doing? Because let's be honest, there are all these ideologies and all these isms out there, traditionalism, Judaism, Islam. I'm sure Hindus do. They have an interpretation of who Jesus is and what he did. Then there are 22,000 different denominations in the world. And may I make a joke? I am so glad I was born into the right one, and just happens to be the right one. Do I have a corner on the truth with, Lutheranism and Catholicism and rationalism and Calvinism and Zwingliism and all these various interpretations? How do we know the correct interpretation of the Bible? And the correct answer is those that give accurate witness to Jesus's death and resurrection. Okay. But there's all these various and sundry interpretations. And so what we're asking as the church is, which one gives the clearest idea of Jesus Christ as the crucified and risen Lord and Savior? Because that's how we know he's the Savior, is because he died and rose again. So which of those isms, which of those ideologies point us to not another ism, not another ideology, but the person of Jesus, what Jesus actually said and did? How do we get there? Okay, so let's talk about where these ideologies and isms come from. Okay, because I already did this presentation. So we're moving on from that. So I thought this was interesting. It says that Jesus is the human agent of creation and new creation. That's what Colossians 1:15 says. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. Okay, then it talks about him being the agent of creation. You can say creator like John 1 does, and that's fine by me. But it says, by him, in him, with Jesus, all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, the seen and the unseen. And then he's the agent of new creation. He's the beginning of the new creation. He is the firstborn. He's the head of the church. He's the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. He is the agent of new creation as well. But let's expand this creation. He's the creator of all things in heaven and earth, and the things that are, heaven and earth, the seen things and the unseen things. So I'm taking those as being parallel statements: heaven and earth, seen and unseen. And then it says, whether thrones, dominions, rulers, or authorities. And so I expanded the and out, creation of seen and unseen, heaven and earth. And the seen and the unseen is thrones and dominions and rulers and authorities. And it's interesting the tack that different Christians take on this: thrones, dominions, rulers, and authorities. Some go, these are spiritual thrones and spiritual dominions and spiritual rulers and spiritual authorities. And another Christian goes and says, no, these are human thrones and human dominions and human rulers and human authorities. And I'm kind of the opinion that this is an expansion of the and, that behind every human throne, there is, if you will, a heavenly throne. Behind every human dominion, there's a heavenly, or spiritual, I should probably say, lest you get confused. That is, Satan's domain overlaps and integrates with human domains and rulership and authorship. Okay. Are you with me? That there's this overlap between heaven and earth, or maybe I should say hell and earth, between Satan's domain and earthly domains, which I've also talked about in another video as well, under the 7 world mountains, the world. Yeah, I have a video on that too. And so, where do these isms and ideologies come from? And I'd suggest it comes from these thrones and dominions and rulers and authorities. That these are human beings inspired by the devil, that we end up with all of these ideologies and isms and whatnot. And that I am going to talk about on Sunday, because at least that's my plan at this point. It's Tuesday. How do I know what I'm going to talk about? So anyway, if you have questions or comments about this, I'd be happy to go over this on Sunday during Bible study. Otherwise, I'm thinking of focusing on the gospel stuff. But notice what he did to the rulers and authorities. He, reconciled all things to himself, whether on earth or in heaven. And then chapter 2, it says he canceled the record of debt that stood against us, nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. And again, that's that demonic realm, earthly realm overlap. What he was doing to Caesar, he was also doing to the spiritual authorities. All right, I'm going to stop there. You can let me know if you have questions or comments. So the Lord be with you. God bless.